Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Atelston Fitzgerald, Hula the First. Now, I am not an American, but I live in America. So, that gives me certain privilege to look at America from a completely different perspective. Now, America has something called the Constitution. And they also have something called the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence means that this was when the Americans became free from the British, because you know the British was under monarchy, right? And they had control over America, right? So the declaration was something that was drafted by the president, which was the third president, which was the first president was George, what's his name? George Carlin, not Carlin. Well, I better call him Carlin because they're all a bunch of freaking comedians. Anyway, so yeah, George Washington was the first president. You understand me? And when George Washington was the first president, guess what? James Madison, Thomas Jefferson was working with George Washington at the same time. They were all switching cabinets. If you look at the first president, the second president, and then you get to the third president, Thomas Jefferson, you'll realize they all have been in the all three first presidency, second presidency, and third presidency, but they all were just in different places. One was either a Secretary of State then, or one was either acting vice president. But they all was some major part of the sector. So when you get to the third or the fourth president, it begins to seem like all the presidents and them are just doing is just trading cabinets. But anyway, that's not the whole point. The point is this: they have something called the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson stated, and I cannot quote word for word, but I can remember some of it. He said that all men are made free, right? And we have what I want to point out is the part where Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, unalienable rights. Unalienable rights mean that this is a right you have as a human being, right? In unalienable rights mean that you have a kind of freedom that no one could take away from you, even if you choose to give that freedom away. Even if you choose to give that freedom away, you can't give it away because you don't own right. You just have unalienable rights to the future. You could just use it, right? So the United States government came and they changed unalienable to the word inalienable. Now the word inalienable now is a whole completely different dynamics. It means that you have all control and freedom to your rights. But you have the rights to give them away. They changed the freaking Declaration of Independence. The United States government changed the Declaration of Independence by switching one single word from unalienable to inalienable. So that could give the government more control or tyranny. By the way, the word is tyranny. By switching the democracy, by switching by changing the concept of the Declaration of Independence, they could use the Declaration of Independence as a manipulating tool, so could have more tyranny over the freaking United States government. That's why I told you democracy is nothing more than a paradox. No, not the paradox. What shit? An irony. Democracy is an irony. And you know, an irony means when there's a contrast of what's anticipated. For those of you all who don't know what the irony means, irony means is when you anticipate something and the complete opposite of it happen. That's all irony is. If you ever hear the word irony in a conversation, it means the opposite of what was anticipated, or the contrast, so to speak. Contrast is the more intellectual term. Right? Democracy is an irony. It's a freaking irony because when you look at it, it's all capitalism.